Why does every baby on Earth throw its arms out and start crying the instant it feels like it's falling, even when it's perfectly safe in your arms? It isn't fear you taught it. It isn't something it learned by watching you. This reaction is already loaded into a newborn's body before it has ever opened its eyes to the world outside. Doctors have a clinical name for it. But the real story of why it exists goes back long before doctors, long before cribs, long before anything resembling a safe place to sleep. Picture an infant only a few weeks old, warm, fed, resting against a caregiver's chest. Then, for no visible reason, the head tips back slightly, or the body shifts a few inches too fast. Instantly, both arms fly outward, fingers spread wide. The whole body stiffens for a fraction of a second, and then the crying starts, sudden and sharp, as if something catastrophic has just happened. Nothing catastrophic happened. The baby was never actually falling, but its body did not know that. This reaction fires in a fraction of a second, faster than conscious thought could ever move. It does not wait for the brain to evaluate whether the situation is truly dangerous. It reacts first and asks questions never. That speed is the first clue that this behavior is ancient. Reflexes this fast are not learned through experience. A baby has not lived long enough to learn that falling is dangerous. This response is already built, fully wired, the moment it is born. Which raises the obvious question, built for what world? Because the world a modern baby is born into, warm rooms, soft mattresses, someone's arms nearby at almost all times, rarely gives this reflex anything real to respond to. Go back far enough, and the answer becomes clear. For much of human evolutionary history, infants were carried, and mothers moved. They climbed. They crossed uneven ground. They occasionally needed both hands free for a moment longer than felt comfortable. In that world, a slipping infant was not a hypothetical. It was a real and recurring danger, one that could end in serious injury, or worse, in a single unguarded second. Anthropologists studying carrying practices across many cultures have noted just how much infant transport methods vary, from slings tied tightly against the chest to rigid cradle boards strapped to a caregiver's back, and how often these methods emerged independently in populations with no contact with one another. Different solutions, same underlying problem. A helpless infant needed to be kept secure against a body that was constantly moving, climbing, bending, and reaching. The falling reflex likely evolved inside that exact pressure, one small piece of a much larger set of adaptations built entirely around the challenge of keeping an infant attached and safe. An infant that reacted to the sensation of falling by, immediately stiffening its body and throwing its arms outward, increased its own chances of being caught. A rigid body with limbs spread wide is simply easier to grab, easier to catch, easier to stop than a limp one. And the crying was not just distress. It was a signal, loud and impossible to ignore, broadcasting exactly what a caregiver needed to know in that instant. Something is wrong, and it is happening right now. Infants who reacted this way were more likely to be caught in time. Infants who did not react this fast, who simply went limp or stayed calm during a genuine fall, lost a critical advantage in exactly the situations where advantage mattered most. There's a companion reflex worth mentioning here because it makes the whole picture click into place. Newborns also grip with startling strength the instant something touches their palm, tight enough to briefly support a portion of their own body weight. Many primate infants rely on exactly this kind of grip to stay attached to a moving mother's fur for hours at a time, long before they can hold on through muscle strength alone. Human infants likely inherited a faint echo of that same system, a grip reflex paired with a falling reflex, two halves of one very old strategy for staying attached to whoever was carrying you. Here is the uncomfortable part of this story. Natural selection does not care whether a reflex still makes sense in a padded nursery, decades removed from cliffside camps and unstable ground. It only cares whether the reflex once helped enough infants survive long enough to pass their genes forward. This one clearly did. So it stayed. It stayed through agriculture, through cities, through mattresses and modern medicine, completely unaware that its original purpose had mostly disappeared. Every baby born today still carries a survival tool built for a world that mostly no longer exists. And here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. If this reflex fires even when nothing is actually wrong, what does that say about how the body handles uncertainty in general? Maybe reacting first and sorting it out later was never a flaw. Maybe it was the entire strategy that kept fragile infants alive long enough to grow up at all. There's a detail here that most people never think about, and it changes how the whole reflex reads. The reflex doesn't only respond to actual falling. It also fires from a sudden loud noise, an abrupt change in light, an unexpected jolt that has nothing to do with gravity at all. Which means the ancient alarm system was never narrowly built just for falling. It was built for anything sudden and unexplained, anything that might signal a threat before there was time to figure out what that threat actually was. A falling sensation, a loud crack, a sudden shove. To an ancient infant's nervous system, these were close enough to treat the same way, because in a world without warning signs, hesitating to sort out the difference could cost you the only chance you had to react at all. You can still see this today in the most ordinary modern moments. A baby laid down gently into a crib, lowered slowly, carefully, with nothing dangerous happening at all, will often still fling its arms out the second contact with the mattress registers as a change in support. A baby lifted out of a car seat, tilted back just slightly during the transfer, reacts the same way. None of these moments involve any real falling whatsoever. The reflex cannot tell the difference between an actual drop and a gentle change in how it is being held. Now, here's the second moment worth pausing on. If this reflex still exists in every baby born today, whether they grow up in a hut, an apartment, or halfway up a mountain, what does that tell us about which parts of us are truly ancient and which parts are simply modern habits dressed up to look permanent? Most modern behavior can change in a single generation. Diet changes, language changes, entire belief systems shift within a few decades. But this reflex has not changed in longer than recorded history exists. It runs on a timeline that has nothing to do with culture and everything to do with deep evolutionary time. Which means when you see your own baby fling its arms out at nothing, you are not watching a mistake or a fluke of a young nervous system still figuring itself out. You are watching a genuinely old survival mechanism activate exactly the way it always has, reacting to a threat that mostly no longer exists, because the reflex has no way of knowing that the cliffside, the unstable branch, and the unguarded fall are mostly gone from modern life. The body kept the alarm. It just lost most of the fires it was originally built to detect. It is worth noting that caregivers evolved a matching reflex of their own. The moment an infant stiffens and flings its arms out, most adults will reflexively tighten their grip and adjust their arms before consciously registering why, often faster than they can explain afterward. Two separate reflexes, one in the infant and one in whoever is holding it, built to interlock in the exact same emergency, evolved together because neither one alone would have been enough. This reflex fades on its own within the first several months of life, as an infant's nervous system matures, and this particular ancient wiring gets gradually replaced by more deliberate, learned reactions to the world. But for a while, every single baby on the planet is running a piece of software written for cliffs, unstable branches, and mothers who occasionally needed both hands. So the next time an infant in your arms suddenly stiffens, flings its arms outward, and cries as if the whole world just gave way beneath it, you are witnessing something remarkable happening in real time. A message sent forward across an almost unimaginable stretch of time, from every ancestor who ever needed to react to a slipping child before conscious thought could catch up. It was never really about the fall itself. It was about a nervous system refusing to take any chances with the smallest, most vulnerable member of the group, even for the fraction of a second it takes conscious thought to decide whether the danger is real. If this ancient instinct still feels familiar, subscribe to Primeval Psyche. Here, we decode modern behavior through ancient survival. The next fear may be much older than you think.